Hello all, my name is Krish Naik and welcome to my YouTube channel. So guys, from past 2 weeks, one of the most requested video was to explain about model context protocol, that is nothing but MCP. You were requesting basically to understand how does this protocol work, what is the important components in this, how do we build applications with this. Each and everything I will talk about in this specific video, and we are going to come up with this series of video related to model context protocol. How I have actually created multiple playlists related to generative AI, LangChain, LangGraph. Similarly, there will be a separate playlist to make you understand about MCP. Since this library is still evolving, I'm trying to find out the right way of implementing in such a way that you should be able to implement with any kind of generic framework itself, right? But in this specific video, we are going to discuss about model context protocol, what exactly it is, what are the important components, how the application is basically generated, and I'll also show you some multiple examples over here, coding examples, so that you can have an idea. But as we go ahead, there will be a separate series of videos that will be coming with respect to model context protocol, wherein we will be understanding or we'll be building some kind of applications using MCP itself, right? So quickly, let's go ahead. And first of all, let me hide my face. So here is the model context protocol. And for this, if you remember, Anthropic has actually come up with this entire concept. It is an open source protocol. First of all, we'll just try to understand the definition, and later on we'll discuss many things about it, right? MCP is an open protocol that standardizes how application provides context to LLMs. Think of MCP like a USB-C port for AI application. Okay. Now you know that with the help of USB-C port, we can connect different kind of devices, like let's say hard disk, camera. We can connect to a phone, and USB-C port is just like one way or one medium how to connect to these specific devices, right? So just get this specific idea till now, and I will explain about the further things. Before going ahead with MCP, you really need to understand how does our website work, right? If you remember any of the website that you probably serve in the internet, right? Let's say in your browser, let's say this is my website, right? www.krishnaik.in. So the client is basically the person who is hitting this URL from the Google Chrome browser. As soon as this specific URL is hit, here you can see there are some very important components like HTTPS, and this is your entire web address, right? So this HTTPS is a kind of protocol that basically means the client is trying to communicate to my website using a HTTPS protocol, right? So this basically becomes some kind of medium, some kind of language, how a specific person is visiting my website, right? Now, what happens once a person visits this specific website using HTTP protocol? It goes to the server, okay? And then this becomes a GET request. Initially, you are trying to probably just see the home page of my website, right? So this basically becomes a GET request. Similarly, you can do a POST request. You can probably do different kind of requests like PUT, right? Now, based on this particular request, you see something in your browser, right? So when I talk about this particular server, this is where my entire application is there, and at the end of the day, client is hitting this specific server, and they're getting the response, right? Now let's say that the server, let's say the client has basically hit like slash login, right? So there is a login functionality in krishnaik.in. As soon as you probably log in, it's just like a post request where you probably fill some of the details and you get some data, and you are able to log in inside the website. Similarly, if you go to slash live classes, you'll be able to see all the courses in my website, like what all courses are there. If you go to slash courses, this is basically my Udemy courses that is available in my website, right? So all these specific things you are able to see it out, right? If you probably go ahead with respect to every link, okay? So, guys, now let's say that whatever services we are building out in our website, right? And if we really want to test it, right? Let's say if I'm using something called as Postman, whenever I hit any of this particular request, the response that I usually get is in the form of a JSON, right? JSON. So in order to communicate to all the specific services, we use something called as REST API. So REST API is one kind of common language that we are using in order to probably access all our backend services, right? And please remember this REST API right now, it is one of the most common framework, common thing that we specifically use. Every developer, right? In if you really want to use any of these backend services, we have to probably create a REST API, and based on this output JSON, we basically communicate and display things in our front end, right? Now, this is fine. Here, the REST API is just like a one common medium through which we are communicating with the server, right? And let's say that tomorrow I want to expose any of these services to any other third party platform. Also, what I can do is that I can say, hey, this is what you really need to give in the form of request, in the form of JSON. And if you hit this URL, you should be able to get this specific response. So we implement this entirely in the form of REST API itself, right? Now, let's go back to our LLMs, right? So what we have learned till now, if you have been religiously following my playlist, we spoke about generative AI, we spoke about LLMs, we spoke about multimodal agents, we spoke about LLM with tools, we used multiple frameworks from LangGraph to LangChain to Creo AI to different frameworks. We have already done that. But right now, one of the most popular framework is LangGraph, right? LangGraph and LangChain. Now, initially, when we had LLMs, the main aim of the LLMs was that we give some kind of input and LLMs who's used to give me some kind of output, right? And that is the reason we used to say this as generative AI. The reason is very simple because it is generating some content. These LLMs used to give the output based on the training with respect to some amount of data, right? So these LLMs are regularly trained. It can be OpenAI GPT's models, it can be Google Gemini models, it can be different models altogether, llama models, so there are different models. Let's say I'm writing over here llama models. It can be grok, open source models like Grok has hosted a lot of open source models, but I'm just going to talk about OpenAI models. It can be Google Gemini models, right? Now, in all the specific models, before what we had, like 3.5, OpenAI 3.5, GPT 3.5, Llama 3.1, 3.2, they are basically trained with some huge amount of data. And what we do is that whenever we give input to these LLM models, we get a specific output. Okay. Now, once we get this output, this is basically generating a content. But do you think by just using the specific LLMs, will we be able to solve all the tasks? Right? Yes, we are just going to solve some of the task, right? But our task will be much more complicated. I'll say, hey, LLM, please provide me this specific research paper. Hey, LLM, probably, hey, AI assistant, please go ahead and drop a mail to this specific email ID. Will these LLMs will be able to do it? The answer is no, because these LLMs are only trained with some kind of data. Okay. So that is the reason when we go to multiple multimodal agents or LLM with tools, here what happens is that your LLMs are integrated with tools, right? So these are like my external tools. These LLMs may be communicating with these tools in a different way. Like I may have an RCIF tool, and if you follow LangChain and LangGraph religiously, you know that there are various tools which you can integrate with your AI assistant, right? Like you have RCIF. RCIF basically means anything related to research paper, you can go ahead and use this specific tool. Anything that is related to Wikipedia search, you can go ahead and access this particular tool. Anything that you want to probably create a RAG database, RAG database, let's say by using data stacks, you can probably use this. If you want to do some kind of internet search, you can probably go ahead and use this DuckDuckGo search, right? So these are like my tools, right? And I have to write a separate code in order to integrate to the specific tools from my AI assistant, right? From my AI assistant. And once we do this, what these tools are actually helping you to do? Let's say that if I give any kind of input, the LLM, let's say that if it is not able to answer this particular input, it will go and see, hey, which tools we are connected to, right? And based on this particular tool, this tool is going to provide the LLM some kind of context to answer this particular question, right? let's say if I'm asking, hey, please tell me more about attention is all you need and this particular research paper number, then it is just going to go ahead and see that which tool it is basically integrated with it. If it is, it sees that, hey, we are integrated to RCIF, then I can use this specific tool and probably get that particular information and provide that context to the LLM, and the LLM should be able to give me the output, right? Now, the main challenge is that if you want to integrate with 2 to 3 tools, you can basically do it. You really need to write one custom integration code, and then you will be importing the specific libraries. You will be writing the necessary code. You will create a wrapper, and you will finish the code for this particular tool. Similarly, for this tool, for this tool, for this tool. But let's say that if this tool keeps on increasing, let's say my LLM requires 100 different tools, right? What is the main challenge over here? I have to probably write all the specific code, right? And then, because of this, the difficulty will increase. You need to manage this entire code repository because you are probably writing each and everything. And tomorrow, let's say if any of these tool providers makes an update, makes the changes, then similarly, you also need to update your integration code, right? This is the major challenge that we are currently facing whenever we want to integrate our AI assistant to external tool providers or services, right? This is one of the main problem that we are having, right? So what has happened now, and how MCP is actually helping to solve this particular problem, right? So we have understood about the problem. Here the problem is that we cannot scale our AI assistant with many tools, many service provider, because the reason is that you need to manage a lot of code, right? Now what happens is that these tools that I have, this LLM assistant or AI assistant that I have, in between we have this kind of protocol which is called as model context protocol. And this model context protocol is a medium between the LLM and all the services that we specifically have, or all the tool providers that we specifically have. Now, this MCP protocol will be one kind of language, one kind of medium where all the tool providers needs to adhere. Adhere basically means they need to follow this specific protocol so that anybody as an AI assistant who's developing an AI assistant should be able to probably use this and communicate with this specific tool. So this becomes a common medium. They just have to follow the standard procedures, right? And similarly, LLM, just by using this MCP, they will be able to connect with any number of tools, since all these tool providers are using this common medium protocol. That is the common protocol between the LLM and all the tool providers. That is what it is, right? That is the reason, even in the website, it is written that this is just like an USB port, right? C type USB port, and this can connect to any number of tools itself. Now, the best thing over here is that if this is happening, you may be thinking, Krish, how we are reducing the code? What about this specific code? If I go to the next slide, before we go ahead and understand about the important components, you need to understand over here, this entire tools and this MCP communication protocol, right? If we go to the next step, we'll first of all understand what are the important components. So first of all, let's understand what are the important components in an MCP protocol, okay? So first component is something called as MCP host, okay? Now this MCP host, what exactly it is, okay? This can be a ID, it can be like VS Code, it can be Cursor, it can be Windsurf, it can be any kind of IDs. Or you can also make this to like, you can use this as a cloudy desktop also. Since Anthropic has come up with this, they have allowed this kind of integration even in cloudy desktop, right? So this is just like one kind of host which is trying to implement this entire architecture and which is trying to use this MCP. Now this MCP host can create a client, okay? Client to probably interact with MCP servers, okay? So there are three important components. One is MCP host, second is MCP client, okay? MCP host is the place where you really want to implement this interaction with the server, okay? Again, you can also create this as the form of application with the help of Streamlit or Fast API, whatever you want, right? So that actually becomes the host. Now, internally in this host, we create clients to communicate with different tools or service provider. And this client will be interacting with MCP server. This is really important. Okay. So three components. One is MCP host, MCP client, and MCP server. Okay. And this MCP server is basically connected to different tools or services. So here you can see this MCP server is connected to some kind of code repo. This MCP server is basically connected to some kind of DB. This MCP server is basically connected to some kind of APIs, right? So similarly, you can have any number of MCP servers, right? Any number of MCP servers which will be specifically connected to different resources, tool providers, or anything as such. Okay. The MCP client, so host basically creates a client, and this MCP client is communicating with the MCP server with the help of MCP protocol. Okay, MCP protocol. Okay, so this client is basically communicating with the MCP server to interact with this tool providers with the help of MCP protocol, right? And then you'll be able to see that based on this interaction, you'll be getting the response, and the MCP host will be able to show in the in its particular ID or application or whatever things it basically requires. Now, already we know that, right? If in the previous mechanism, if we don't use MCP, right? In our AI assistant, if you want to really use this specific tools, we need to write this integration code for this specific tools itself, like RSave, Wiki, RackDB, or DuckDuckGo search. We used to write this. And let's say if there is any kind of updates over here, we also have to probably update our code. Now, with the help of MCP, what MCP has actually done, like they are saying that, hey, the server and communicating and this tool providers or services will be completely managed by the service provider itself. This is really important. See, guys, this entire server that we are probably through which we are basically communicating it from our host, right? In the with the help of MCP client. This, along with the entire service provider tools that we want to access through MCP server, will be managed by the service providers. This is really important. That basically means if any change is basically happening, the service providers are just going to do the changes. Our integration with the help of MCP protocol will be same. That basically means any number of updates that is happening over here, we don't have to update anything over here. The calling mechanism will be same because with the help of MCP protocol, we follow some mechanism how to communicate it. So once we write the code, right? If this tool providers have any kind of updates, they'll make the updates in the backend, right? We don't have to do any kind of updates over here, right? And this is the most beautiful thing about MCP, what I liked specifically, right? Before, I was just like, whenever I used to implement a lot of application, whenever there were some updates with respect to this particular service provider, we also had to do some of the updates with respect to the integration of the code. Let's say with respect to parameters, with respect to any kind of additional codes that we used to write. But now it is not something like that, right? All this tools or service provider will be connected with the MCP server. This both will be handled by or managed by the service providers. All we have to do is that how we are connecting it to this MCP server. It can be our local, it can be third-party APIs, it can be third-party companies, service providers. All we have to do is that we have to just connect it and we have to use it for our purpose, right? And this is the most beautiful thing, right? And these are some of the important components. As I discussed, the most important components over here are MCP host. Second important component is MCP client. This MCP client will be within the MCP host. And the third important component is basically MCP server, right? And this MCP per server will be connected to the tool providers or service providers, right? Now, this is fine. Till here, you have got a complete idea about it, but still, we need to understand how does the communication happen between all these important components, okay? As soon as a user provides an input, okay? So here, let's talk about this particular component. So here, I have my three components. One is MCP host. There is an MCP server. And if I talk about MCP host, here internally, I will be also having my MCP client, because with the help of client, we will be talking to our servers, right? Now, As soon as we get an input, and this is basically our LLM, because at anywhere we have to use this LLM, right, as our AI assistant. Okay. So the first thing over here is that as soon as I get my input, okay, so as soon as I get my input, okay, this MCP host, let's say this can be my ID, let's say cursor ID, okay, it can be my cursor ID, or it can be my VS Code, or it can even be Cloudy Desktop, okay. So here, let's consider that this is my ID, okay, host is my ID. This will first of all find out, it will go and hit based on this particular input to the MCP servers, okay. And MCP servers will return what all tools it has over here, or what all service provider it has over here. So once this information goes back, then what it does is that this MCP host will hit the LLM or my AI assistant with the question and the tools that is available inside the MCP server. Okay, so this is my second step. I'm talking about the communication part also, right? This is my second step. So it will probably go ahead and hit the LLM with the question and the tool. Okay, tool. Then LLM will provide a response which tools to use. Okay, out of this particular tool, let's say in my MCP server, I have a DB, I have an API. So based on this particular input, since we have given that questions plus tool to the LLM, it will say which tools to probably use. Let's say it says, hey, go ahead and use this particular DB tool. Then what will happen? It will go back to the MCP host. Then along with the question and the tool, it will hit that specific tool. So it will call that specific tool through the MCP server. So what will happen? The next request will come over here, and then it will hit this particular DB tool. Then we get the response. And after we get the response, the context that is there, we will be sent to the, it will be sent to the LLM, and we finally get the output. Okay. And that is how we are basically doing the entire communication in MCP. So here the MCP host and servers, how it is communicating with the help of MCP client, and how we are getting the specific information, and finally how we are getting the output. So I hope you got a very clear idea about model context protocol, and you also understood why we specifically use MCP. A very important interview question, people may ask it and all, right? Now it's time I show you one example. See, this is one very good example that I've just implemented in my cursor. But as I said, I will be coming up with a lot of series of videos related to MCP. It is always good that we start from completely basic. So this MCP is basically, we used it using Python SDK. Okay. And here I'll just give you an example. Inside this cursor setting, you can see that I have integrated one MCP server, which is like weather. Okay. And this weather is created completely by me. Okay. You can use third-party MCP servers also, and I will show you how you can integrate it as we go ahead. And you can also write your own custom. So here, if you see weather.py, this is what we have done, right? We have probably written this. There are two methods. One is there is two methods. One is get alerts, and the other tool is something called as get forecast. And this I have integrated inside my cursor, which is my host, right? And I will create a client which will communicate with this. So this is what is it. I've created a client basically communicating with this particular weather.py. And here you can see in the right hand side, I can ask any question. Hey, what is the weather of, let's say, California? If I go ahead and ask this, I'm selected an agent. You should be able to see that it will first of all go ahead and see all the information it is being able to give me, right? And again, I just want to show you the use case. See, main thing is that I want you to develop this completely from scratch, which I will be helping you in the upcoming series of video. But how to develop this, how to come up with this, each and everything I will be talking about it. We'll talk from a basic example. And here you can see that I'm able to communicate with this entire weather API, which is added as an MCP server in my cursor, right? My cursor is basically the host, right? And later on, I'll show you how you can integrate with the LLMs and all, and many more things as such, right? So I hope you like this particular video. I hope you're able to understand all this stuff. Yeah, this was it. And yes, there are a lot of videos that are going to come up where we'll be talking about MCP, how you can start it, how you can work with LangGraph, and many more things. I'm preparing all those specific materials. Okay. So yes, this was it from my side. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.